everyone. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. Today, I would like to share with you the story of the baby who actually helped inspire my research work. So I am a neonatal dietitian, and I have the incredible privilege to be able to help babies who are born too small and too early to get them all the way till their term, which is at 37 weeks. And while we are quite successful at getting a number of these babies to really thrive and help them to do anything that a baby of their age should be doing, such as eating on their own and breathing on their own, there is unfortunately a number of the babies that we care for who don't thrive as well. And one of the main reasons is because in the second and third trimester, one of the major organs to develop is the lung. And so if you're born premature, you actually disrupt this very crucial period of lung development that needs to happen. But on top of that, some of the life-saving interventions that we have to provide to these babies in the NICU can cause injury to their lung. And so the combination of these two things can lead to this condition called bronchopulmonary dysplasia, which is actually a chronic form of lung disease, which I'm going to refer to as BPD. So BPD is actually characterized as a need for respiratory support at 36 weeks. And it is the most common morbidity among babies who are born less than 1.5 kilos. And among the babies who are born less than 30 weeks in Canada, about 45% of these babies will end up having BPD. And so this is why the story of this baby that I cared for actually started. So this baby was born at 23 weeks and 6 days, and he was at a weight of 540 grams. So if you think about this, this is a baby who fits just a little bit bigger than the size of the palm of your hand. And so because he was so small, he actually needed a ventilator to help him to breathe. And so while he had difficulty breathing, one of the things that we also had a hard time to do for this baby is to help him gain weight. And so initially you will see he started gaining along this yellow section. And we wanted him to continue to do that. But what he actually ended up doing was he continued to go along the red line, which basically meant that he was growing that was much smaller compared to a baby of his age. And so we were quite worried with this, and so we provided him very aggressive form of nutrition in order to help him gain better weight. And over time, we see that he actually starts to grow parallel to this yellow section. And we were really pleased with that because while he was quite a bit smaller than other babies of the same age, it meant that he was starting to gain weight similarly to babies of his age. And so we were really happy with that. However, one of the things that really perplexed me with this baby was that while he started to improve his weight gain, he actually did not improve in terms of his length. And so you see here that over time, instead, he actually pulls further and further away from this yellow section where we wanted him to gain length at. And so that meant that this baby started to become much shorter than other babies of his age, which is what we refer to as stunting. And so the combination of him stunting quite severely, but now starting to gain weight at an appropriate rate meant that he looked very much like this picture. And so over here, you can see that this baby is quite overweight. You can see that he has excessive fat mass a bit everywhere throughout his body. And that raised a question to me, because in the adult ICU literature, we actually know that when they've compared obese adults versus adults who are non-obese, we actually see that these babies require higher ventilatory needs, and they also end up staying on the mechanical ventilator for longer. But we don't know whether that is true for babies who are born preterm. And the thing that what we do know is that in the NICU, one of the things that do contribute to the development of BPD is the mechanical ventilator. And while that is life-saving for these babies, it can also cause this barotrauma on the lung, which leads to this cascade of inflammation that does not overall help with the development of the lung. And so there has been this tremendous push in neonatology to try to promote much more gentle forms of ventilation in order to help protect the lungs of these babies. One of the other things that we have to keep in mind is that often the babies that end up with BPD experience things in the events in the NICU that are different from the babies that end up without BPD. They often are exposed to much more steroid, fluid restriction, they are under tremendous stress, which means that they will have difficulty gaining weight and growing in the same way. And so my question became whether it was reasonable that if these babies are experiencing these different events that can cause growth suppression and are severely stunting, whether it is reasonable for them to continue to gain weight in the traditional fashion when we know that what ends up happening is that you have a disproportionate but I couldn't find any evidence that showed that it was okay to move beyond just looking at weight for these children. And so I really wondered whether using instead something like length and BMI, whether that was a much better indicator of how to monitor growth in these very preterm babies. And so my research question became whether in babies that are born less than 30 weeks, whether linear growth and body composition is associated with the risk of developing BPD. And my overall goal is to try to identify whether there are growth patterns and body composition that are associated with helping these babies lower their risk of ending up with BPD. So for this study, I think there's a slide missing. So for this study, our first objective was to determine if linear growth is associated with BPD, and we thought that children who experience this delayed trend in linear growth are going to have a higher risk of BPD. Our second objective to determine whether body composition, where we use BMI as a proxy, whether that was associated with BPD. And we think that the babies who do have an increasing trend in their BMI are going to be at increased risk for BPD. So we did a retrospective multi-center cohort study where we included infants who were born at the McGill Children's Hospital, the Jewish General, and Saint Justine. And between these three centers, we were able to catch about 70% of preterm birth babies who are born less than 30 weeks in Quebec. For data collection, we use a combination of the Canadian Neonatal Network database to collect information on infant and maternal characteristics and outcome. And then we did a medical chart review collecting weight, length, and caloric intake from birth to 36 weeks for these babies. So we had initially 1,024 infants who were eligible for the study, and after we applied the exclusion criteria, we ended up with 880 infants who were included in the final sample size. So for our first objective, when we wanted to look at the association between linear growth and BPD, what we did is we had a control group that showed with infants who had a change in their Lyme Z-score between -1 and +1. And we compared that control group to 4 different groups of infants who had varying levels of change in their Lyme Z-score over time. And to look at our second objective for BMI and the risk of BPD, we actually did a very similar analysis, but instead of using change in length, we've used change in BMI Z-score. And so our primary outcome is using bronchopulmonary dysplasia or death, where BPD is defined as the need for supplemental oxygen or respiratory support, or tragically, we looked at whether these infants died at the end of 36 weeks. So for statistical analysis, when we compared our infant characteristics and outcome, we did a Pearson chi-square test for catechol data and a NOVA test for continuous variable. And where we compared our control group with our 4-study group that I mentioned, we did a multivariable logistic regression where we adjusted our odds ratio for known confounding factors such as the use of steroid, sex, etc. We use a two-sided p-value of less than 0.05 to be considered statistically significant. So our study had as main limitation the consistency and accuracy of obtaining these length measurements since we were a retrospective study. However, my hope for this study is that we will be able to provide some evidence as to why length and body compositions need to become key components in neonatal growth monitoring. And my hope is that with that, we can build better guidelines that are specifically suited for babies that that will develop BPD. My hope is that also we can further address this issue of why these babies experience linear growth failure to begin with. With that, I would like to thank my supervisors, the dietitians I work with at the Montreal Children, and all the NICU babies who really continue to inspire our work. And with that, thank you very much for your attention, and I will be open to questions.